Good evening, Shivaram sir.
Good evening, Anjul. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Good evening, Sivaram sir.
Good evening.
Yes, sir, I
Chitra
can
ma'am,
hear.
How are you, ma'am?
Dr. Chitra,
Yeah,
sir.
both, yeah.
I'm fine, sir. How are you, sir?
I'm fine, ma'am. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you online after a long time.
Thank you so much, sir. I'm really happy to meet you all, sir.
How is Ariyalur under your leadership?
No, I'm not really like say going too deep into the administration right now over there.
Okay.
I'm just doing it at the superficial level,
Okay,
like
okay.
studying the ground situation.
Situation, I know, right? Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Hello, Geeta. I think we've met at some eco seminars.
Chitra. You know her. You
Chitra,
both know
sorry.
each
Yes.
other, I think.
I
Chitra
hope
ma'am
you
is our
remember.
patron. Ma'am is the patron of our clubs, Dr. Srilata, HOD of Chellamal College. She retired as a head
Oh,
of the department at Chellamal.
okay.
Malarvadi set. Malarvadi
Ah,
who worked with you. Yes, I'm her set.
okay,
And all
ma'am.
that. But
Okay.
I'd not joined. I joined long ago, not long before her. We've
Yes.
met at some missing.
Uh,
Perhaps you will know me if you see me. I don't want to be seen with this, all these.
okay.
Okay, right. I hope
She's
you
Okay,
know.
coming
ma'am.
at
Okay.
that.
Remember.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Nice meeting you, ma'am.
Students, we can start.
Ma'am, am I audible?
Yes.
Good evening and a very warm welcome to all present here. We are delighted to begin today's session of the fortnightly online symposia organized under the auspices of In Tandem, the research club of the PG and Research Department of English, Queen Mary's College, Chennai. As part of our academic theme year 2025-2026, Regions and Translations in Indian Writing, today's session, titled Frontier Regions, invites us to engage with stories shaped at the edges of nations, histories, and identities. Frontiers, as we all know, are not just geographical, they are deeply political, emotional, and often literary. In this session, we move across time and terrain, from the violence and displacement of the partition to the environmental catastrophes that marked East Pakistan's troubled past. It is our privilege to begin with our keynote speaker, Dr.S.Chitra ma'am, Principal, Government Arts College, Ariyalur. Dr. brings with her over 3 decades of academic experience as an associate professor in English. Her areas of interest are both diverse and profound, ranging from partition literature and translation studies to Tamil Sangam literature and Vaishnavite hymns. She has translated Dr. A. Mangeng's play Pachamanne, Rajam Krishna's biographical fiction Pattayal Padinta Adigal, and several short stories in English, further underscoring her deep commitment to bringing languages and cultures. Among her 34 published research articles, 5 focus exclusively on Sri Vaishnavite hymns and hagiographies, showcasing her nuanced engagement with spiritual and literary traditions. Today, she will deliver her keynote on the topic Representing the Nation, Analyzing Narrative Strategies in Indian Partition. This talk promises to unpack the literary techniques through which fiction attempts to represent and sometimes reimagine the fractured nation, collective trauma, and enduring memory that emerged from the partition of India. It is with great respect and anticipation that we now invite Dr. S. Chitra ma'am to deliver the keynote address.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction from your end. And good evening to one and all present here. First of all, I would like to thank Maria Preeti, my good friend, for giving me this opportunity to deliver this lecture. And it's always really I'm very happy, and it gives me a lot of pleasure to address students, because in the past 2 or 3 years, I've been more into administration, and it's really great to meet academicians, teachers, and also my dear students. And I hope this is yet another PhD for me, because the totally based on my PhD thesis. And I think I'm greatly indebted to my supervisor and guide, Dr. Anita Balakrishnan. And even today, I still remember the day on which I presented the Viva OC. And it really feels the same today also. And she too had promised to join. I hope Dr. Anita had joined. So it gives me a lot of pleasure to give a very small lecture on this topic. And my colleague Shobana from Bhutanallur College, she will be sharing the screen, because I'm not really good in these technical the PPT. And after a long time in this administration, I hope to do some justice in this academic lecture. And the title of my presentation will be Representing the Nation, Analyzing Narrative Strategies in Partition Fiction. Almost I have taken the very same title which I have used in my PhD thesis also. Yes, next slide. And next slide on frontier literatures. Shobana, next slide. Next slide. No, frontier literatures. Yeah. So to give a very brief introduction from Webster's International Dictionary about this particular term, frontier literatures, it's mainly based on the United States of America, and the term frontier had been defined in various ways. And what are the key aspects that we are going to borrow from this particular terminology? It will be the unsettled population in a particular, say, geographical location, as we call it, the nation today, or say the particular place where we all live in, and we believe that this is our place, we are rooted in that particular place, and suppose suddenly we are unsettled due to various reasons, then what happens? So this particular genre of frontier literatures, the terminology is borrowed from the American fiction. And also the areas of frontier were no longer the exclusive domain of explorers, missionaries, and trappers, but settled homesteads were relatively rare and widely dispersed. So the populations that had settled in a particular place, why they suddenly feel unsettled, why they wanted their own places or geographical locations or different nations, and they wanted to settle. The reason being, say, religion or any other language or any other reasons that were the cause for these unsettled behavior. So that is where we fix partition, Indian partition literature into this particular title. Yes, the next slide. Now, how to approach this particular topic? The next slide, Shobana, it's on historiography. Yes. So this particular topic is very, very important because in research, as we always know, how we are going to move into this particular, say, area of partition or anything that is related to history. So historiography is the art of writing history. So in what ways partition literature, partition Indian subcontinent had presented partition historiography. So this is what we are going to see in this particular slide. And the historiography or the histories, the generally recorded histories in, say, the Indian context, they just claim that this partition is a cataclysmic event and innumerable lives, innumerable people, they died and it shattered a large section of population and it uprooted practically the whole countryside in Punjab and its neighboring areas. And as people fled in both directions in search of their newly formed nation. So this is how generally the historiography, and another thing is historiography has got the power to magnify or diminish major political events in its own way. So it is totally an area where we are able to feel the art of writing history or the recorded history or the official history of a particular nation. It moves along a particular way in which it can safeguard the total entity called nation. So a sort of a monolith nation is presented over there in order through these historiographies, just telling that because of these reasons, like say religious divisions and other things, this event has happened. Yes, the next slide. So we call this particular recorded or official history and how we are going to look into literatures. So the conflation of history and literature takes place at this particular point. So the nationalist historiography of not only India or the Indian partition, many of them, they are concerned only with the causes rather than the effects. This is the first point that we have to know. They talk about the transfer of power and how India was divided into two nations, India and Pakistan, and how Gandhiji felt at that point. These are the normal narratives that we keep listening to. But what really happened at the borders, how people were suffering and how millions of lives were lost in this whole event, nobody talks about this in a detailed way. So that is where literature pitches itself into the focus, and it will talk about how to recover these hidden experiences. And through not only literature, but we are going to talk a little bit about non-fiction writings, autobiographies, memoirs, and oral histories. These are part of the subaltern historiography that tries to revive and recover all these hidden experiences. So this is the basic difference between the official history and literature. Yes, the next slide. Now, how are we going to say focus on this particular, how to deal with this? Normally, students of literature, we try to move emotionally into the literary part of it, but today's presentation of mine and even my thesis as a whole, we have done lot of literary criticism and many critics we have quoted, because always personally I believe that the theories can rightly fit you into, or say lead you into the path of research writing. So this is my personal belief. So again, when I'm talking about official history and these types of personal histories that are recorded in literature and non-fictional writings, I go back to Michel Foucault's traditional history versus effective history. So it is very easy to understand, even from the terminology, what Foucault calls traditional history. It is the official historiography that we were discussing about, which talks only about the cause and not the effect. The other term which he uses here is effective history, which will deal with the events in terms of its most unique characteristics and their most acute manifestations. This is how Foucault says that effective history will deal with the same cataclysmic event which have been recorded in a cold, neutral way in the name of official historiography, and it will be contrasting the traditional way of narrating history. And this is where literature plays a very important role. And even, at this juncture, I would also like to say the traditional history that I have argued. We talk about, say, the Hindu or the nationalist historians, how they have depicted the particular partition scenario, and the Muslim historiographers, how they had depicted, and the Sikh historians. And the fourth dimension will be the British version of the partition history. And after this only the revisionist methods come, that is, we have the subaltern historians giving their own perspective, and also the feminist historians like Urvashi Bhutalia, Kamla Bhasin and others. They also give a specific emotional say touch to this particular say effective history, as Foucault calls that. So in order to relate all these concepts, I think Foucault will give us the lead to the argument. So that is where the theories help us a lot. Yes, the next slide, please. So it will be very interesting to note how Foucault describes this effective history in one of his quotations. He calls it an approach that is similar to that of a doctor who looks closely, who plunges to make a diagnosis and to state its difference. So, in fact, Nietzsche also, he says historically and physiologically. So the cold distancing or neutrality which the official historiography maintains is totally absent in this effective history, or to be very precise as far as this particular topic is concerned, referring to literature, non-fiction writing, autobiographies and memoirs. So this is where we are just trying to look into conflation of history as well as literature. We are not looking at them as two different identities, but we are trying to make, say, conflate them and look into the possibilities of how to provide a revisionist history or a different type of understanding to this particular partition literature. Yes, the next slide, please. Human dimension of partition literature. So this actually becomes what Foucault calls effective history. Here again, I would like to quote from Ashish Nandi, one of the most important literary critic and historian. He says history lies not by misrepresenting reality, but by exiling emotions. I think that single quote sums up the whole concept of my presentation today. So the emotions that have been exiled in the historical representation, we are going to just look into them through the literature part of it. So there we are reversing the cold approach of neutrality which the traditional history maintains, and we are going to bring in a human dimension. Next slide, please. We are also bringing in Hayden White, the postmodernist historian, in order to see how the modernist literature also represents these type of say historical experiences through stylistic innovations and abandoning the authoritative point of view. So this particular postmodernist viewpoint of Hayden White also gives us a lead into how to look into this particular type of, say, partition literature. And also, he talks about the representational techniques for such typically modernist events as the Holocaust, the two world wars, and other catastrophes of the 20th century. Postmodernism plays a very, very important role in representing such cataclysmic events. So we are trying to fit in partition also into this particular framework. Yes, the next slide, please. Two periods and two types of narratives. Now, how is this particular presentation which I'm doing and also my thesis, how we have structured it? It's on the one side, we are going to look into the concept of nation. And on the other side, we are going to look into narration, these two techniques. So how this particular thesis had proceeded with that. We have divided the whole literature, partition literature, to two different periods, the 1950s, 60s, and then the 1980s and postmodern era. We are taking novels from these two periods, and we are trying to look into the concept of nation and narration. So we are able to see the concept of nation also had undergone a paradigm shift. At the same time, using the postmodernist technique, the narrative style also had undergone a paradigm shift. How we are going to look into these two things. So that is exactly the title of my presentation also. So to briefly say what are the findings or what we are aiming, the statement that we are trying to put in here would be, the nation had moved from a monolith singular structure to a diverse polyethnic structure. This is what we are trying to prove through these two different periods of narratives that we have chosen for this study. And also the narrative style had moved from the linear to the circular, and postmodernist techniques, trauma, memory, fantasy, historiographic metafiction, and all other techniques have also come into play while representing partition. So how in the olden period, that is the 50s and 60s, even if you take, for example, a narrative like a fiction like Train to Pakistan, how Khushwant Singh had tried to represent partition. Or we have done an analysis of an Indo-Canadian writer, Balachandra Rajan. And he had written a novel called The Dark Dancer. And we are trying to see how India, the concept of ahimsa by Gandhi, how those things have been represented in that novel. And we have also chosen another narrative by Atia Hussain. So we are trying to see how the 50s and 60s had narrated partition. And in the postmodern literatures, we have chosen three different novels. One will be Kamila Shamsi's Salt and Saffron, and Mukul Kesavan's Looking Through Glass, and Shauna Singh Baldwin's What the Body Remembers. So these are the 6 novels we have chosen, and we are trying to see like how these nation had evolved in these 40 years, or say in this 50 years, and how the narrative techniques have also changed. So the final argument that we are making is the nation also had moved from a monolith structure to a diverse polyethnic structure, and the narratives also had moved from the usual traditional linear to the circular form, and postmodernist techniques have evolved in the due course. So this will be the overall way in which we are dealing with these two concepts of nation and narration through partition literature. Yes, the next slide, please. Yes, some of the theoreticians that we have used, I think even this will be very useful to present day scholars also, not only in the concept of nation and narration or because nowadays many of them are not going deeply into these critics at all, but they provide very valuable arguments which will really fit into the texts that you try to work on. So my advice to my younger research scholars will be to study in depth many of these, say, scholars, literary critics, and not confine yourself to, say, only literary criticism. We have to move on even to, say, a historian like, say, Anthony D. Smith, because he will give you very important points on the theories of nationalism. And his book, Nationalism and Modernism, is a very, very important textbook. The argument, the whole argument I have just presented in this slide, the old faith in the unity and superiority of the nation and its state was shaken, and the new generations in the West, accustomed to travel, migrants, and mixing of cultures, no longer felt the full force of ancient national memories, tradition, and boundaries. This will be the type of argument that Smith presents in that book. And as scholars, we can try to fit in the arguments to the present day scenario or the text that you are going to, say, analyze. If you are working on, say, particular historical contexts like this, or say the concept of nation and narration, we can always use such theoreticians. And yes, the next slide, please. This is the most important, not exactly a critic, but a very famous speech that Ernest Renan he makes in 1882. What is a nation? Because he is the first one to talk about this concept of nation in 1882. And according to him, a nation is a soul, a spiritual principle. And two things constitute this soul or spiritual principle. One lies in the past and one lies in the present. So these ideas will really take you to what exactly is the concept of nation and how it had evolved over a period of time. So these sort of theories and, say, the critics who give you these ideas will really structure your thesis. The next slide, please. Yes, the next one will be Ernest Gellner. He talks in his important textbook, Nations and Nationalism. He will also provide you a wider scope for understanding the emergence of nations, and he does it, or he locates it in the concept of nationalism. And he totally rejects the idea of shared cultures. He just locates the concept of nation in nationalism. This is a one theory that Gellner gives you. You can read it and adapt it to whatever research you are going to do. Yes, the next one will be the most important, two important critics, Eric Hobsbawm and Benedict Anderson. And the invention of tradition by Eric Hobsbawm is a very, very important text. And Anderson's imagined communities, I think scholars of my particular period, like in the 90s, 2000 and all, no thesis will be, say, complete without mentioning the name of Benedict Anderson in one way or the other. He is such a celebrated and most important critic even today. His textbook, Imagined Communities, also will give scholars very important ideas about what is a nation and how you can fit into the narrative schemes that are being employed, because he feels that even the concept of nation had undergone some deconstructionism in the postmodern context. So you can just go through that. Yes, the next one, please. Yes, this particular historian, William McNeill, this tripartite periodization of history, pre-modern polyethnic hierarchy, modern national unity, and postmodern polyethnicity. This gives you the whole structuring of how to look into, say, a particular nation the division that had happened in a particular nation, why it has happened, and what are all the causes and the effects. So look into the first periodization, that is the pre-modern polyethnic hierarchy. That is before the Western ideologies creeped into the mindset of this the whole world. We had this pre-modern polyethnic hierarchy. Modern national unity, it is always fixed with the advent of the Western knowledge systems that had penetrated into almost all the societies. So, if you look into partition narratives that we have divided into two divisions, we are able to understand that the 1950s, 60s, the novels which we have chosen in that period is modern national unity period. And of course, the 1980s and the other novels, set of novels that we have chosen from partition literature, it is postmodern polyethnicity. So, like that, we are able to say bring in this tripartite periodization of history and fit them into the say the novels that we are analyzing. Yes, the next one, please. Yeah, a few quotations I have just given you here. I'm just going to deal with one single concept, which is very, very important from Benedict Anderson, which is closely associated and related with. Yes.
Someone has turned their mic off, please.
Somebody has to mute their mic.
Can you identify the person? Ramya, whose mic is that, ma? Please tell that person. Sai Kripa, please tell that person to.
Ramya R. Ramya R, can you hear me? Please switch off your mic.
Or remove her from the meeting if possible.
Ma'am, I'll call her, ma'am. Just
Yeah,
one
call
second.
her, please.
Yes.
அந்த வேலையை உங்களுக்கு ஓகே ஆகலையா ₹400 கொடுத்துருந்தீங்களாடா ₹400 கொடுத்துருந்தீங்க
Ramya, please turn off your mic.
ஐயா
Yeah. Yeah, I'll just continue. Benedict Anderson, one concept that I'm going to deal with here will be subnationalism. That exactly fits into, say, these types of frontier literatures or nations that have been divided and smaller entities had formed themselves into nations. So the reason for division within a nation is subnationalism, and Anderson observes many old nations, once thought fully consolidated, find themselves challenged by subnationalism within their borders. So this is the particular exactly we are looking into partition in this uh, particular context. And the creation of Pakistan bearing Islamic distinctiveness leading to partition of united India stands testimony to this claim. So the concept of subnationalism, which Anderson discusses, exactly fits into, say, for partition of India, and also how to look into the literatures of these two different periods. Yes, the next slide, please. Yes, we are also bringing into another most important post-colonial critic, Partha Chatterjee. The reason being, Partha Chatterjee actually contests the nationalist model of, say, Anderson's view of nationalism and its origin traced to the European model alone. But Partha Chatterjee contests contests that and challenges that. And he says, if you look into the anti-colonial nationalism and India, it has got two different domains. One will be the material and the spiritual. And as far as the material domain is concerned, the West might have, say, tried to influence our thoughts, but definitely not in the spiritual domain, because it deals with a cultural identity and also the distinctiveness of one's spiritual culture. So this type of arguments also we have to focus here. The next slide, please. So to conclude, after all these arguments, what we are trying to conclude here is, we discuss about, say, the Hindu perspective or the nationalist perspective, which considers India as a full entity. And then when we go through the Islamic perspective, like say Aisha Jalal's critiquing of partition and all those things, we find that the Hindu perspective always keeps telling that British practiced divide and rule, and also Muslims, they were always after separatism. This will be the idea, the traditional way of expressing. The Islamic perspective will always argue that the Muslim League that was headed by Jinnah was not responsible for this partition, but it's only the domination of the Hindu majority as well as the British divide and rule. This partition happened. And the Sikh perspective is an exclusive perspective, because they neither belong to the Hindu fold nor the Islamic religion, and they were caught in between this particular the political imbroglio, and how they faced a terrible say massacre of millions of Sikhs during this cataclysmic event. So these are the traditional ways we are able to see how historiographies related to partition tells us what are the causes and all those things. But when we come to subaltern historiography and feminist historiography, they give you a totally new revisionist perspective, especially Ranajit Guha's subaltern historiography, which practices looking into history from below. So it doesn't look at history from above, but it looks at history from below. So from the emotional perspective, how the same can be looked into. And feminist historiography, I have dealt with, say, feminist historians like Urvashi Butalia, Kamla Bhasin, and others, how they look into this particular revisionist perspective. So these are the, say, the criticisms and what can I say, the other, it gives a perspective of how to look into this particular, say, partition literature through the way of, say, this consolidated viewpoints that are expressed by various critics and historians. We have to take in all these views so that you will get newer ideas and newer approaches to look into this partition literature. So to conclude with, I think this was more of a heavy dosage of criticism and other things, because I think that this is very, very important for you, because reading a novel and analyzing a novel is one thing. But to read a novel, we need this type of, say, a training to read and go through different criticisms and historical perspectives, so that you can, say, have a solid thesis with you. And even if you look into the chapters that we have dealt with, for each and every chapter, we have tried to bring in a particular concept or a particular theory, and we have fitted these things. So for example, I'll just conclude my lecture. one novel from, say, the traditional period, that is the 1950s and 60s. I have taken one novel titled Balachandra Rajan's The Dark Dancer. And from the other end, that is the postmodern perspective, I have taken, say, Mukul Kesavan's The Looking Through Glass. So, if you take Balachandra Rajan's The Dark Dancer, the narrative technique used over there is a linear narrative. And there I can talk about a particular character called Kamala, who is a total Gandhian who follows the ahimsa and soul truth and totally dedicated to the concept of, say, nationalism, patriotism, and other things. And finally, as we all expect, she sacrifices her life and she almost becomes a martyr at the end of the novel because she is caught in the partition violence. Actually, she serves in one of these camps where all these people who had crossed the borders and they have come back to India losing their properties and other things. And so she, while serving in one of those partition camps, she loses her life. So this is one type of a narrative. Now, if you come to, say, Mukul Kesavan, how do we fix into the circular narrative form, the postmodernist technique? The novel begins with, say, the 1990s, but the hero is carrying in a flask the burnt ashes of his grandmother. And when the flask, along with the ashes, it falls into the Gomati river, like he also falls into the river. And when his life is saved and along with the flask, he has gone back to the period of, say, pre-independence. So now you can very well understand how the postmodernist writer, like, say, Mukul Kesavan, he can shift the narrative and make it circular. It begins in the 1990, but immediately the heroes is taken back in time and he goes back to the pre-independent period. And here we are able to see each and every celebrated moments of nationalist history, like, say, Quit India movement or Gandhiji's ahimsa or Gandhiji celebrating the, say, the qadar, the clothing, the rough clothing. Here, Mukul Kesavan makes fun of all these things. According to him, Quit India is a total sham. And he tries to bring in the fantasy elements of postmodernist technique. And he tells us like how the Quit India movement itself is not what it had been described in a traditional official history. And he takes his own imagination and he tries to construct, say, a revisionist history. And the way he mocks at, say, Qadar as a clothing, it's really very, like, say, the traditional historians or the nationalists will really not even accept that type of a revisionist narrative because he totally makes fun of ahimsa, Gandhi, metafiction, that type of the a critical concept which Mukul Kesavan also tries to employ in this partition narrative looking through a glass. So when we read these two novels belongs to two different periods, we are able to immediately fix the differences. And we are also looking into not only the narrative techniques, we are also able to see that the nation is no longer a single monolith structure and we are able to see the nation is trying to accommodate diverse viewpoints even in the way of narrating history. Because see, it is not only the polyethnicity or the diverse voices that we are accommodating here, the most important thing that literature does here is it is trying to give a different perspective to say history as such. And this is what Linda Hutchin calls as problematizing the history. So these are the basic things which I just wanted to discuss with you. So being a very say you have to be really into the theories and the criticism, so that when we are going to read historical uh, say fiction like this, there is a conflation of history and literature in these texts, uh, especially partition literature. It is very, very useful to go through these critics and other historians whom I have mentioned. And the current need for discussing partition had emerged again and again in this nation, even with say the Jammu and Kashmir issue, or say the Pahalgam attack on the Operation Sindhu. You can just look into the whole way in which things are emerging in the current context, and from where all these ideas had totally emerged, and why partition had taken place in that particular period, and also in 1971 how Bangladesh had been formed as a separate nation, where language had played a very important role in creating that separate entity. And whereas when you take Pakistan, it is religion that has played a major role in creating a separate nation. And there is still an unsettled region above Jammu and Kashmir, which we call POK, or the Pakistan occupied Kashmir, where even today we have lots of problems that are going in over there. And again, the problem that we are looking into POK is that different ethnic leaders in POK, they just try to occupy different spaces and they claim to be their own. So this frontier literatures, or what this Indian partition uh, literatures and the various aspects that we are seeing, is very much relevant even today, because the geographical concept of say a nation keeps on changing, and also the concept of nation also keeps on changing. And with all these say the confused state in which the present world itself is moving towards, every nation going into war with the other nation, and try to redefine their borders, and bringing in lot of say changes, geopolitical changes. So these are all the history, the history through which we are living right now. And so this particular approach of nation and narration will always be a theme that will be very, very fitting into any period of time. And so scholars can always have different perspectives, and you can also come out with a different research in this particular area, which will be a very fertile area for doing research. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for that insightful and evocative address. Your analysis of narrative strategies has reminded us that fiction not only bears witness to the past but often reconstructs it in powerful, empathetic ways. We now move on to the paper presentation segment, which takes us further along the theme of frontiers, this time into the socio-environmental landscapes of East Pakistan, a space fraught with ecological disasters, geopolitical crisis, and contested memory. We are honored to have with us Mr. Roshan Raj Singh, Junior Research Fellow, and Ms. Monika Rani, Senior Research Fellow, both from the Department of English Studies, Central University of Jharkhand, Ranchi. The joint presentation is titled Navigating East Pakistan's Socio-Environmental Frontier, Biopolitical Fallouts, Vernacular Spaces, and Echoes of the 1970 Bhola Cyclone. Mr. Roshan Raj Singh doctoral work focuses on the representation of climate change in contemporary literature, a concern that's not only timely but urgent. His interests also extend to Dalit literature, Holocaust narratives, and partition studies, all of which center marginalized voices and experiences. Ms. Monika Rani is pursuing research titled Secessions Failed and Successful Biafra and Bangladesh in Select Literary Depictions. Her areas of interest include military dictatorships, civil wars, and LGBTQ studies, marking her as a scholar engaged with questions of identity, governance, and resistance. Their collaborative paper explores the Bhola cyclone of 1970 not just an environmental event, but as a biopolitical crisis through a lens that blends vernacular storytelling with historical analysis. We now invite Mr. Roshan Raj Singh and Ms. Monika Rani to present their paper.
Very good evening to all of you. Today, I'll be presenting a joint paper which is co-authored with Monica, and our paper is titled "Navigating East Pakistan's Socio-Environmental Frontier: Biopolitical Fallouts, Vernacular Spaces, and Echoes of the 1970 Bhola Cyclone." Our paper explores the critical intersection of official landscapes imposition on vernacular landscapes. It argues that such spatial interventions significantly amplified the devastating impact of the 1970 Bhola cyclone. And it consequently intensified resistance movements, which led to East Pakistan's independence. This paper employs Doreen Massey's concepts of space-time and Joni Adamson's framework of vernacular landscapes to analyze how these fictional and non-fictional accounts depict the cyclone. By examining the text, the study depicts how top-down planning, which is detached from local ecological knowledge and communal practices, created vulnerabilities that exacerbated the natural disaster, and ultimately it contributed to the geopolitical upheaval in the region. The geographical area where present-day Bangladesh is located has been dynamic, and natural forces have been continually shaping and reshaping this deltaic expanse. This is not a recent phenomena, and as William Van Schendel writes in his book A History of Bangladesh, and I quote, "Time and again natural forces have acted as protagonists in Bangladesh's history, upsetting social arrangements and toppling rulers." If we go back in time to 5th century BC, when urban centers started springing up along the rivers, we find that the fate of these settlements was always tied to the river's whims. We can see this in the example of Tamralipti, which was an important port for trade between China and Alexandria, and which eventually declined in the 8th century due to deltaic silt that choked up its harbor. We can also look at another example of Lakhnauti Gaur, which was the Sena dynasty's capital and one of South Asia's largest cities of its time. The city of Gaur was settled and moved many times because of westward shift of the Ganga River. And in 1575, when the river changed its course once more, the city Gaur lost its strategic importance, both politically and geographically. So we see the patterns of rise and fall of Bengal's riverine cities depict the temporal framework which is offered by Ferdinand Braudel, who is a French historian. In the first volume of his seminal work, The Mediterranean and the Mediterranean World in the Age of Philip II, he distinguishes between three interrelated planes of time: the La Longue Durée, La Histoire Sociale, and La Histoire Événementielle. So, La Longue Durée refers to a history of constant repetition, ever recurring cycles. a history whose passage is almost imperceptible. And la histoire sociale or the social history is the history of groups and groupings, and it has slow but perceptible rhythms. While la histoire environmentale is a realm of the history of events, where a history of brief, rapid nervous fluctuations. So this framework of Brodel is especially useful for understanding this region's riverine past. Cities like Tamralipti and Lakhnauti Gor rose to power and later declined, not because of singular events, but because of slow changes in the river systems. And these gradual shifts exemplify Brodel's almost imperceptible movement of history. So if we look at Bengal's long durée, it can be seen in two political partitions. First, which happened during the British era in 1905, and then in 1947 with the division of the Indian subcontinent. After 1947, when this part became East Pakistan, the Pakistani government's language decree, which insisted that Urdu alone should be Pakistan's national tongue, it provoked widespread Bengali protest, as the local population mostly spoke Bengali. This led to a long language movement that, among other things, led to the secession of East Pakistan and formation of present-day Bangladesh. This process exemplifies Brodel's notion of la histoire sociale, in which collective grievances and emergent solidarities usually unfold gradually before erupting into transformative political action. In the year 1970, a natural disaster laid bare the vulnerabilities of East Pakistan. The Bhola cyclone, which hit in 1970, had wind speeds of 140 miles per hour and a storm surge of over 20 feet. The cyclone inundated almost 25% of the region and claimed from 250,000 to 500,000 lives. And it also destroyed approximately 65% of the fishing industry. West Pakistan's slow and inadequate response after this disaster amplified existing grievances, and it transformed a natural disaster into a biopolitical crisis. Despite relief efforts that were pouring in from foreign nations, the central government of Pakistan remained largely unresponsive to this catastrophe. This languid response fueled widespread resentment among the people, and the catastrophe contributed to the landslide victory of Awami League, which was a major political party in East Pakistan. And in the 1970 elections, Awami League won 100 of the 162 seats in East Pakistan. So, this electorate's overwhelming mandate for self-governance and survival set the stage for East Pakistan's eventual secession in 1971. So, here, as in Brodel's La Histoire Environmentale, a singular event shattered the status quo and propelled a nation towards irreversible change. Now, against this backdrop, we have examined select literary narratives that explore the intersections of environmental disasters and political marginalizations. Texts such as Soraya Khan's Noor, Arif Anwar's The Storm, and The Vortex, which is written by Scott Carney and Jason McLean. These texts depict the exacerbation of local vulnerabilities in light of hegemonic environmental narratives. So, our study challenges the conventional historiography that, as socio-environmental historian Iftikhar Iqbal observes, often relegates the environment to a static geographical background. But our study instead posits that environmental factors, particularly when filtered through socio-political and biopolitical lenses, are dynamic forces that shape political and cultural trajectories in regions which are already susceptible to climate vulnerabilities. The theoretical framework for this paper has been derived from the works of Doreen Massey and Joni Adamson, particularly Doreen Massey's concept of space and time and Joni Adamson's concept of vernacular landscapes. Now, let us look at Doreen Massey's relational conception of space and time. Karl Marx, in his book Grundrisse, talks about how capitalism works. He says, firstly, capitalism wants to sell things everywhere. It tries to break down borders and reach every corner of the economy. of the world so that businesses can buy and sell goods in more and more places. Secondly, capitalism wants everything to move fast. Capitalism just fast. It wants more quick. Means speed in communication trade. So products and money, as well as information, can move fast from place to place. So together, both of these aspects, it means that capitalism wants to shrink the world, making distant places feel closer by making trade and travel faster and easier. Doreen Massey agreed with Karl Marx that capitalism tries to speed everything up and connect the whole world, but she added something important, which is that not everyone experiences this the same way. She argued that while some people benefit from this fast connected world, like rich countries or big companies, there are other people like workers, small communities, or poorer countries which may struggle or be left out. So Messi believed we need to look at who wins and who loses in this shrinking world. She also did not like the idea that capitalism makes every place feel the same. She believed that places still matter. They are full of people, culture, and relationships. And each place is a meeting place where different lives and stories come together. Capitalism may try to make the world feel flat and fast, but real places always stay complex and unique. Many people long for an idealized past where communities were perfectly unified and stable. But this golden age of the past rarely ever existed. This romanticized view isn't harmless. It often fuels nationalism, selecting uh, historical narratives, and often fuels hostility towards outsiders. So, consequently, making sense of a place can be mistakenly be seen as a reactionary act. Messi's work debunks this myth of perfect communities while acknowledging the deep emotional pull these nostalgic ideas hold. Messi does not agree with the idea that a place is just a dot on a map or a completely self-contained idea. She says that a place is actually a dynamic hub of ongoing interactions and relationships. We can think of it like this, that a place is not fixed. It is constantly being shaped by what happens there and the people who interact within it. A place is also not uniform. A single place can have many different, even conflicting ideas and identities within it. And the boundaries of a place are human made. We may draw lines on maps or in our minds for convenience, but these are not natural. These are not unchanging features of a place itself. So, this way of thinking allows for a global sense of the local. It means that every single place, no matter how small, is connected to and influenced by a huge web of global relationships, cultures, and histories. So, Messi then brings in the idea of time space compression, which essentially means that due to technology and global capitalism, the world feels smaller and faster. In this global world, things and people can move across vast distances much more quickly. However, this speed and mobility is not available to everyone equally. Some groups of people, often the powerful and wealthy, they have much more freedom to move, travel, and access resources. When some people can move freely and quickly while others are stuck, this weakens those who are already disadvantaged. For example, global businesses can move capital rapidly, but local workers might be tied to a specific location, giving them less bargaining power. So, Massey argues that how we understand and organize space is directly tied to how history unfolds and how power is distributed. Essentially, Massey wants us to see that places are complex, they are ever changing hubs of activity, and that control over movement and access within these places is a key way that power and inequality are maintained. We always need to look at both the what and the where to truly understand the world. Joni Adamson expands on John B. Jackson's idea of two types of landscapes, vernacular and official landscapes. Vernacular landscape is the local lived in place, which is shaped by communities, traditions, and personal relationships. while official landscape is the top-down imposed landscape, which is designed by governments or corporations for control, extraction, and administration. And official landscape often dismisses local knowledge as irrelevant. Adamson argues that official landscape often dominates and exploits the vernacular landscape, and that education often teaches us to value universal abstract knowledge over our personal local experiences. She emphasizes that understanding both and acknowledging the importance of the vernacular is key to challenging power structures and creating more inclusive ways of learning and living. Vernacular landscape is a lived and intimate geography. It is a world which is animated by memory, community, and cultural rhythms. Such landscapes are not static or nostalgic, but they are dynamic spaces of relation and knowledge. These lands are the geographies that hold deep significance for those who inhabit them. The vernacular foregrounds local knowledge, collective memory, and lived geographies that dominant institutional frameworks often they render them invisible. She notes that alternative visions of the world then requires a knowledge not only of the vernacular landscape as well as official landscape. So engaging both becomes essential to reimagining relationships between power, place, and pedagogy. Now, coming to the first fictional text that we have chosen, which is the novel Noor by Suraya Khan. This novel deals with landscape and memory. The novel is about the horrors of war and the fragility of human relationships, and also the astonishing power of love. The novel talks about the impact of Bhola cyclone on the lives of characters Sajida, Ali, and Noor, and it also challenges the linear history and confronts environmental and political violence. So the narrative of the novel is non-linear. It resists linear historiography, which is imposed by official landscape, and it does it through spatial and temporal layering. So in the narrative, we see a juxtaposition of 1990s Islamabad with the suppressed memories of 1970 East Pakistan. And through this juxtaposition, it creates a compressed continuum. There is also a eco-feminist lens through which we can read the text. And this is a powerful response to the environmental and political violence that was taking place at that time. And the narrative of the novel is also rooted in post-colonial ecofeminism. The concept of space as social relations has also been explored. So Messi's concept of space, which is constructed from social relations, it is central to the character Noor, who traverses memory and landscape through her drawings. Noor is a child who often draws and paints through memories which Sajida, her mother, has told her about Bangladesh. And her drawings often embody this relational space-time, which acts as windows into another world. And it collapses the boundaries between past and present. Now, starting from the